Nearly 3 years ago, I made a video talking about things that scared me as a kid, and one of the things in that video was a really weird and creepy memory that I had from my childhood. I remember as a kid waking up one day and seeing my dad at the end of the bed watching something on the TV. When I came over to see what he was watching, it was a documentary or movie of some kind. The documentary featured an outhouse in the middle of a desert, and this is a photo that kind of displays exactly what it looked like. I remember seeing a cowboy on horseback approach the outhouse, and he was sort of your average John Wayne looking cowboy with a vest and hat. After arriving to the outhouse, he got off of his horse and went inside. A little while would pass before the cowboy stepped out of the outhouse, but when he did, I remember seeing a disturbing creature randomly appear out of nowhere from inside of the outhouse, and I remember this creature latching onto the cowboy, grabbing him, snatching him away, and pulling him back inside of the structure, and then closing the door behind them. From what I remember, the cowboy had no idea that the monster was there and was taken completely by surprise. And when he was pulled back into the outhouse, I remember hearing a lot of screaming and struggling from inside. And it lasted for a little while before stopping. So this is where my memory gets a little bit fuzzy because some of these things I'm not 100% sure about them, but I do remember them to some extent. I remember seeing the History Channel logo in the corner of whatever this was, whether it was a film or a documentary. I remember this program having a narrator of some kind, and one of the things that I remember him saying was Emnago, which I always assumed was the name of the monster, and the name Emnago always stuck with me. I also remember the narrator saying something along the lines of there are multiple Emnago or there are two Emnago, which again made me think that there were multiple of this monster. I also remember the creature peeking out of the outhouse, and I'm guessing that he was doing it to make sure that there was no other people in the area. Again, I'm not 100% sure about these details, but I do remember these. Now, in terms of describing what this monster actually looked like, I think the best way to describe him is, do you remember in Home Alone 2 when Marv had a lot of paint on his face and he started getting a lot of, whether it was paint or powder, he started getting a lot of stuff all over his body and face? That's probably the best way to describe what the monster looked like. I remember it having decently long curly hair with a lot of grayish skin, and it was wearing clothes from what I remember. I remember it looking exactly like Marv from Home Alone 2. I also kind of remember the monster having some more animalistic features, like I remember it having some sort of nasty looking teeth. I remember it having really pale grayish skin, and I also remember that it had claws, but the claws, I don't fully remember what they looked like. I remember them being claws, but I also remember them looking like eggshells, kind of like the eggshells from Jurassic Park, but that might not be true. I've had this memory of seeing this for a long time, but even to this day, I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was a documentary, I don't know if it was a movie, and that's the thing, as a kid, I used to watch a lot of TV shows about things like this. I used to watch Monsters and Mysteries and Monster Quest, and a lot of TV shows having to do with cryptids. But even coming back to these several years later, I cannot find anything that resembles this scene in any of those shows, despite these being things that I watched as a kid. Watching this particular scene as a kid was something that has stuck with me for a long time, and to this day I just don't know what it is, and I've always wanted to find it. For a good while, I was convinced that this was just some distorted memory, or maybe it was a dream that I'd had as a kid, but all of that changed when I got a comment under the video by a user saying that they had seen the exact same thing that I had when they were a kid. To quote the commenter, "Bro, after watching this video and thinking about it, I got the craziest goosebumps. I know exactly what you're talking about with Emnago. I remember the scene exactly as you described it, and it scared the shit out of me as a kid too. It didn't hit me right away because I remember the word being Wendigo, pronounced Wendigo, in the History Channel special. I've been on the exact same quest to find that lost content as you. That's so crazy. If it helps, I remember that in the same documentary, I remember the show talking about how coffins used to have a device built in where a flag would pop up if movement was detected after a person was buried. I also remember that the scene following the one you're describing had the narrator saying something along the lines of, "The two men made a horror movie mistake, they split up. It's been driving me crazy for like 15 years." I cannot describe to you guys how excited I was when I saw this comment because it meant that it was not a dream, it was not some distorted memory that I'd had. This was a real TV show or documentary of some kind that was seen by multiple people, and that means that it's out there somewhere. For the longest time, I had always told family members about this, and they'd always said, "Well, no, I don't know what you're talking about," or "No, I've never seen anything like that." The idea that somebody else out there had actually seen the same thing that I had was freaking phenomenal. This commenter, who we'll call Jacob, also released some very interesting details about the documentary. The biggest detail, in my opinion, being that Emnago was actually Wendigo. Of course, because it was an old memory of mine, I heard Emnago and remember Emnago instead of Wendigo. For those of you who don't know what Wendigo are, they are creatures in Native American folklore that usually are depicted in one of two ways. Sometimes they are depicted as creepy deer's skull creatures, and sometimes they are depicted as creepy gray creatures with pale skin. A creature similar to the internet stories of the Rake. Though the deer depictions of the Wendigo look nothing like what I remember the creature looking like, the gray humanoid version of the Wendigo is a much closer fit. And some of the other details that he mentioned, like the coffin and the mention of a narrator, just add on to the fact that this is something that is out there and it can be found. Me and Jacob had replied to each other back and forth about this, talking about different details and what else we could do to find this, but unfortunately he stopped answering around 2 years ago. I've made a few attempts at reaching out to him, but either his account is inactive or he's otherwise busy. I don't think he was lying about this. But while he was still responding, we did come across some interesting leads. There's an infamous horror novel by the name of Blood Meridian. If you've been on the internet recently, you've probably heard of it. In the book, there is a scene where a cowboy goes to an outhouse, and when he opens the door to the outhouse, the villain of the book, Judge Holden, who is a really pale, giant, creepy person, is sitting down in the outhouse waiting for him, and the moment that the cowboy opens the door, Judge Holden reaches for him, pulls him inside, and kills him. This scene from the book has a lot of similarities with what I saw as a kid, but there is one glaring problem that just destroys this as a lead. Blood Meridian does not have any kind of live-action adaptations. There's no movies based on Blood Meridian, and there's also no documentaries, as far as I know of, that include live-action segments of the book itself. Because of this and the mention of the Wendigo, what I saw was probably not a Blood Meridian adaptation. We had also came across a movie by the name of Cowboys and Aliens, and this also seemed like a promising lead. Cowboys and Aliens was released in 2011, and if there is a time frame for when I might have seen this documentary, it must have been sometime before 2012. Unfortunately, despite the movie containing cowboys and these creepy gray aliens, there was no scene involving outhouses or anything close to what I remember seeing. Nothing in the movie resembled that scene. But luckily, before Jacob stopped responding, he mentioned a show called History's Mysteries, which ran from the 90s to 2011. I've seen a few episodes of this show, and it seems to be our best lead yet. It has a narrator, it talks about a lot of things like cryptids, and I think there are a few Wendigo episodes. It has a few live-acted segments, and it did air on the History Channel. If there is a show out there that does have this scene in it, this is probably that show. But unfortunately, this is where we run into a really big problem, and it's that History's Mysteries distribution is all over the place. There are hundreds of episodes of this show, but for some reason there are only a few available on streaming services, and it's not just that this show is not readily available, it is not available at all. At least most of it is not available at all. I've looked around on other streaming services and the History Channel app and the History Channel Vault. Most of the show, History's Mysteries, is not available on any of these streaming services at all. This is a massive problem because I was originally planning on watching this show to try to find the scene, but if the show isn't even available anywhere, how do I find it? By this point, I'm at a dead end. It feels like there's not too much else that I can do, and that's kind of why I made this video. I'm not asking you guys to go watching YouTube videos and go watch TV shows or to go looking on the internet for this scene or any shows. But what I do want to ask you guys is, have you seen anything similar to what I have described? Have you seen History's Mysteries before? Have you seen anything like this before? You remember seeing something like this? The reason why I ask is because if Jacob saw something similar, if he claims that he saw the same thing that I did, there must be other people out there that have also seen this and maybe know where it's from, or maybe know a clue or a detail about it that could lead me in the right direction, and I could use some help with that. If you've seen History's Mysteries before, maybe if you watched the show and you think, hey, yeah, this could probably be in that show, let me know. If you've seen anything similar or remember watching something similar to what I'm describing, let me know. If there's TV shows out there that maybe not History's Mysteries, but other TV shows out there. I've heard of other ones like Lost Tapes. If there's other shows out there that might contain this scene, let me know. If you guys could help me in the comments, I would greatly appreciate that. This is something that has haunted me since I was a little kid. It is a core memory that has stuck with me for a long time, and I really want to find this scene. This is something where I can tell that if I do end up finding it, it is going to be the most surreal experience watching it again because of how infamous it has become to me. If I do end up finding it, I will give you guys an update, but until then, thank you all so much for watching, and again, if you guys can help in the comments, I would greatly appreciate it. God bless, and I'll see you all next time.